Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to see you. We're going to let the interwebs clear themselves out a little bit. It's 4 o'clock exactly right now, but we'll give it a second so that people can spill in on this session. We're really glad to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you are at the California Environmental Literacy Initiative's District Innovation Hub webinar series. If you have a link for something else and you happen to click on the wrong one, we hope you stick around and join us and stay with us. All right, give it just another minute and then we'll get this going. All right. Well, hello, welcome. Happy Thursday. We were just, doing a little pregame in the background, talking about spring break. I know a lot of districts are either out right now or are heading out tomorrow. Our district is out today is our first day of spring break, and I hope the spring break is bringing you flowers and rainbows today. You're at the California Environmental Literacy Initiative's District Innovation Hub webinar series. We're really glad you're here. And today our topic is funding strategies for environmental literacy. This is the third in a series of webinars we've been offering this spring. Our first session was about school board leadership for sustainability and environmental literacy, talking about how school board members and superintendents can lead from the top and how the grassroots can interact with those district leaders. All of the webinar series sessions are recorded, so you can go back and check that out. And then last month, we took a look at AB 285, the new climate science legislation in California requiring all districts to include climate and science instruction next year. So that's available as well. But today, we turn to the question of how do we pay for this, and how do we put money behind the things we value, and how do we make change happen in our districts. My name is Nate Ivey. I'm the co-chair of the District Innovation Hub. I work as an instructional coach in Fremont Unified School District. And we'd love to learn a little bit about you. So in the background, Sarah's going to drop a link in the chat to a Padlet. If you're a return participant, you've seen this before probably, and you might have a little minute here to find your dot and do an update. But if you're new, open that Padlet link, click on the pink or magenta colored plus button in the bottom right-hand corner, and that'll give you a pin to drop in your location. On your pin, you can create basically a name tag. It says where you're from and maybe a little bit about you. It helps us get a sense of our community here in the California Environmental Literacy Initiative. So let me give you a second to get those links open. And while you are telling us a little bit about yourself in the Padlet, I'll tell you a little bit about CAELI and the District Innovation Hub. CAELI's theory of action here is a collective action framework that through a variety of networks, we can affect change and live up to the goals of California's Blueprint for Environmental Literacy. The California Blueprint for Environmental Literacy, published in 2015, acknowledges that California has these amazing pockets of excellence around environmental literacy, environmental education, environmental action. But we haven't yet reached systemic implementation. Some kids get these opportunities and other kids don't. Some districts do quite a lot of this, other districts not so much. Some classrooms on a campus have an amazing teacher that leads this charge, and other classrooms maybe don't. So we envision a future for California where environmental literacy is for all students. To help move that forward, CAELI is organized around a number of innovation hubs, community partners, county offices of education, districts, equity, green career education, policy and advocacy, and professional learning. The efforts of all of these innovation hubs often come together in some of the themes that we present through the District Innovation Hub. Throughout Cali, but particularly in the District Innovation Hub, we really think about these systems approaches to change, and we view districts as the fundamental and maybe most critical unit of change to ensure that all students in a system have access to environmental literacy. There's about 1,000 districts in California and a number of frameworks that districts might apply from the California Green Ribbon Schools 3 pillars model of environmental impacts and cost, health and well-being, and environmental sustainability and education. The 4 Cs model that Andrew Yogoyan often talks about campus, curriculum, community, and culture. And the Green Schools National Network, beautiful flower model up there of leadership, climate and culture, facilities, and curriculum. So we think that when districts are thoughtful about implementation, thoughtful about equity, and thoughtful about leadership, we're in a good position to try to guarantee environmental literacy access for all students. In our District Innovation Hub, we are trying to build a community of practitioners around the state. We want to curate and share best practices. We want to build capacity for this work so that districts have the skills and the information they need to lead. We want to showcase leading edge exemplars, and we want to deliver good support to all of you. These webinars are a good way for us to meet many of these goals. We hope that you make connections with the presenters and with each other through the chat, and also in breakout rooms that will follow the formal presentation today. We will showcase a number of leading edge exemplars today, so hopefully you'll see some really innovative practices today that might inspire you to take some next steps in your own work. So our topic today is funding strategies for environmental literacy. To explore this topic, we have broken the session into the presentations into 3 sections. We're going to take a look at the role grants can play in helping districts move forward. We'll take a look at bonds and career technical education funding. And then we'll look at this, kind of the general funds, the local control funding formula, kind of the big pots of money that districts have and how to use that regular funding money to support the work. Districts have, a variety of places where they get money, the sources listed up here, but also parcel taxes and other sources of funding. So when we can pull these funding streams together and support a strong vision for what we want our students to know and be able to do and the kinds of experiences we want them to have, we think we can really affect change and come up with systemic solutions. So our first topic is going to be about grant funding. Grants come in many flavors. There are federal grants, state grants, local grants, many local grants from utilities, water districts, waste haulers, and also local foundations who donate money because they have a vision and share values around the environment. Today we'll hear from Siberi Nakbar. She is a member of the District Innovation Hub. She's a trustee in the Carmel Unified School District, and she's also the Ocean Guardian School Director and the California BWET Coordinator for federal grants through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Siberi to tell us a little bit about these grants from NOAA and the ways that they have helped schools and collections of schools inspire districts to implement systemic change. Siberi?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Nate. I'm very excited to be here because I love to talk about opportunities to expand our geographic footprint and get more money into schools and school districts and county offices of education for environmental literacy, but in addition to that, climate literacy and ocean literacy. So as Nate mentioned, I run 2 grant programs that approach environmental, ocean, and climate literacy with different strategies. The first program is the NOAA Bay Watershed Education and Training Program, that's shortened for BWET, and I am the California coordinator. I've been implementing this program in California since about 2002, so for quite a while. And we actually can go to the next slide, Nate, if you can. There we go. And I wanted to just give a little snapshot. This was actually really interesting for me to actually see how many dollars we've actually provided to California schools in the 20 some years that we've been here. And it's added up to more than $21 million that we provided in grants. So the California BWET program, essentially the main goal is to get kids outside, connecting to their environment, focusing on local issues that pertains to their community, and getting out into the environment to study that issue multiple times throughout the school year. It's providing that opportunity for connection, but also bringing it back into the classroom to align with instructional materials that are taught in the classroom, and providing kids an opportunity to ask questions about things that are affecting them on a day-to-day basis. The California BWET program provides up to $100,000 per year for school systems, and our goal really is to provide systemic implementation of environmental, ocean, and climate literacy in schools. In addition to that, we also provide professional development for teachers, building capacity to implement ocean, environmental, or climate literacy, which includes working with site administrators, working with experts in the field of these literacy components, and really trying to just build capacity within teachers so they're comfortable enough to teach within their classrooms. Another approach that we have is the NOAA Ocean Guardian School Program, which is also a grant program. That is smaller grants. It's up to about $4,000 for schools. And that is working directly with schools and school districts to implement stewardship-based projects on their school campuses or in their community. That focuses more on the hands-on component of environmental, ocean, and climate literacy by getting kids outside and implementing stewardship projects that help benefit or guard the ocean, protect the ocean. This program has been operating for 10 plus years. We're actually going on about 14 years now. And again, adding up the amount that we've cumulatively provided to California schools is about 1.3 million for stewardship grants. And so collectively, our programs really, we hope, are implementing environmental literacy that results in changes. And we do evaluate heavily in terms of changes in behavioral attitudes, skills towards environmental, ocean, and climate literacy. I thought, well, actually, before I introduce our next guest, I wanted to just provide some timelines. So our NOAA Ocean Guardian School grant application, it's a very simple application. It will be available online April 1st, so coming up just in a few days. We actually encourage schools to work with students to build out the application and develop the budget. And then the California BWET application is due usually in the fall. So this October timeline, 2024, we'll have an announcement out. That's a federal grant that is a little bit more complicated, but like I said, it's up to $100,000 per year for up to 3 years. So it's a multi-year grant. The Ocean Guardian School Program is actually run through a foundation, so it's much simpler to do. But I thought the best way to really describe what these grants do is to have one of our recipients present to you and talk about all the cool things that she has done and is currently doing. She's actually received both a NOAA Ocean Guardian School grant and a California BWET grant. So let me introduce Christine Lund. She has 26 years in education as a general education teacher, a director of math and science grants at the county, and is now currently an elementary principal. She also calls herself an outdoor enthusiast, and she's committed to getting young and old learners outside to experience how they are part of the ecosystem. So with that, Christine, let me pass it over to you.
Hi. Well, I am really honored to be here, and I'm going to build right on what Seaberry shared. So I too have a real core to the heart goal of getting students outside and to really support educators to know how to work with students that are outside. It's a whole different kind of management and a whole different way of looking at your standards. I've been honored to be the recipient of this grant multiple times. So I thought I would start first with sharing my journey of what I've learned through these grants, and then to also share the impact that it's had on the educators that have been able to be part of these grants and how that has gotten out to all the students and how we did this systematically. So the first BWET grant that I was able to get, it was actually one of the smaller ones, and it was targeted towards high school teachers because in our county we did not have any high school science professional learning happening at the time. It was soon after NGSS had been adopted, and we were really looking at how to bring in the environmental principles into high school instruction. I was an elementary educator. So when I was at the county, that was one of my first tasks, was to work with secondary teachers and being able to do that. And the positive part of the grant was teachers were so on board and so eager to participate in the outdoors. I had many high school teachers, physics, chemistry, biology, earth science, who had not gone off site of their campuses to see how their disciplines, their core ideas of their sciences fit with the environment. And so it was amazing to see those synapses connect and the ahas happen at the high school teacher level of how they could bring in the park down the street. I was in Marin County at the time. So many of our schools are adjacent to a really beautiful outdoors. It's one of the beautiful parts of being in this part of California. And they realized they could do that within a 45-minute period. When you're dealing with high school, you have structures of time and schedule. So that was my first, like, wow, this BWET grant really impacts instruction. And we had teachers on board. So we got ambitious and we went for the BWET grant, the $100,000 a year for 3 years in a row. And we designed a model that then was going to be targeted towards elementary school, and that it would be supporting teachers taking their students outside in their local environment and knowing how to bring in that classroom NGSS science standards to their local environment. At this time, there was not adopted curriculum. They were using curriculum that was sending their students to Yellowstone. I love Yellowstone, but it's not in Marin. It's not where the kids go outside to play. So the grant was then set up again for teachers, and we had teachers on board, and it was a county initiative. And teachers signed up, and they were able and wanting to be part of the Summer Institute, and they wanted to be part of the cohorts throughout the year because we wanted to have opportunities for implementation check-ins, but there was still something missing. So then we were able to get it a second time in the county, and I switched districts. I actually moved across the county line to Sonoma, and I took a principal's position. And what I learned in that time period was when teachers are provided the opportunity to engage as learners and to experience the pedagogy around inquiry-based instruction that intentionally brings in your climate literacy standards and your environmental principles, they get excited. But what I heard every time was, Christina, my principal, I need to follow what it says in the book. Christina, my principal is not going to understand why I want to go to McNair Park 3 times in the same year when we were trying to show students a location over time. So I recognize the importance of, I got to figure out how to get this to the administrators. So we attempted to do administrator workshops, and I was hard to get them there. And at this point, again, I had been a classroom teacher. I had taken on the grants. I had not been an administrator of a school site yet. So I took this position up here in Rohnert Park, and it was during 2020. So there was a different weight on my time. And what I learned in this district that I moved to was their teachers had had 0 NGSS professional learning, like zip, nothing, nada. And there was no curriculum they hadn't even gone through the science adoption for materials. So all of our elementary schools are adjacent to a watershed trail. Every single elementary school in this district is adjacent to a watershed trail. And I was still talking to my Cordell Bank sanctuary, NOAA connection, and we were brainstorming. And that's when she introduced me in that systems talk to the Ocean Guardian Grant, because my school site that I adopted as a principal has a strong garden program. And we have ended up being a really strong candidate for the Ocean Guardian Grant. And we are in our 3rd year of being an Ocean Guardian school, focusing on rebuilding our habitat component of our garden. So we have an edible garden and we have a habitat garden, and that just keeps growing through our work with our Ocean Guardian Grant. So that grant now has fed into now what we have, our Be Wet grant for the district. So what systematically needed to happen was I needed my site principals to be on board, and I needed to tie it into our district initiatives, which was EL, building our EL instruction. And my experience was, when you have something worth talking about, your students are going to acquire academic language. And so I used science in the environment to be that medium. Principals then were right on board, because I then brought in our test scores, and I asked questions about their engagement of their learners. And again, remember, this district had 0 science professional learning, and our ELs needed something to talk about. And so we then tied that, and their 5th graders were not going to outdoor education. So we took a need in the district and we identified how we needed it, and we built on that. And so here we are in the last 4 months of our Be Wet grant, and we are going to go into our 3rd summer institute. So if you can go to the next slide if you'd like. We are going into our 3rd summer institute, where we have really been focusing on how to support teachers engaging in their local environment. So I have 2 partners that offer field trips to our district through another partnership with our tribe here. And so we were able to really tie in our local resources that were already in place in our district. So this Be Wet grant built upon systems already here in our district. We were able to capitalize on our professional learning days, where I was able to pull teachers to talk with them, to get them excited about doing this. It was my principals were on board. So now any communication that happens about this grant goes through our education services. My assistant superintendent has been participating in the summer institutes. And then the principals have been celebrating their teachers who are going and asking them to share how they're using the park next door, literally next door to their school, with their science instruction. So now this was the game changer. It was a very different experience from when I did it at the county level, where it wasn't tied into each district's initiative. We tried to, but I never had an administrator part of that decision-making process. I tried, I reached out, I wanted them there. Now being a site administrator, I have a deeper understanding of their toll on their time. So you have to tap in. So now I look at it as, this is my core philosophy is in education. And I feel that it's my job as an administrator to facilitate this work with the teachers of our district. So now what's happening is, systematically, each of our principals have identified where their strength is and what they can offer, so that we can build and do that professional learning with our teachers. So it's systematically now part of our conversations. And that's what's happened to it. Now we are at the stage where they went through the piloting process of a curriculum. We're adopting it. And for many of us who have been part of that process, I still would rather they use a lot of the resources on 10 strands. So I'm still using them as our resource. I still would rather they use the data sets from NOAA. So now what we're doing is this final institute, which was part of the initial grant, that we would get to a place where, 1, we had a science curriculum. 2, we had every 5th grader going to outdoor education, that we would have other funding happen. And that's where we are. Where we need to still go is deeper science professional learning for inquiry-based instruction. My worry with the curriculum is it comes with a workbook. My staff will be asked to try a science notebook instead, and we put the workbooks in a closet, so that they can focus on the skill sets. So that's our next final workshop, is going to be actually taking their science curriculum that was adopted just this month, and we are pulling out the anchor phenomenons, and we're looking at how they align to the two partnerships that we have locally, the Fairfield Osborne Preserve and the Laguna de Santa Rosa watershed. And then we're looking at what NOAA, because the NOAA data sets are the game changer for all the classrooms, if you could figure out and use that on a regular basis. So we've been working with our teachers to use those data sets to figure out how to pull them, how to take the time to look at them. And then we're going to show them where the math connections are in the curriculum that they have, so they're not making it up. We're going to show them where the engineering components are in the curriculum and how to build an inquiry-based learning cohesive experience using the resources that they have, using their two partnerships that they have. And right now, we will not have a BWET grant next year. We have found other sustainable funding to build upon it, which is the whole goal. We have now another grant that's supporting and working with our students to get to outdoor education, since that's still a fiscal challenge for a lot of our families. But another group, our Education Foundation, is committed to this journey. Our school board is committed to this journey. They've been part of it. My school board just asked me, are you set up to write another grant when it opens up again? To have a school board member ask that means they've been aware and a part of the journey and seeing the successes. So that means I just looked at my assistant superintendent and said, all right, Ed Services, let's pull this together. So we will, but we'll be able to move our teachers to our next level, which is, again, what we want. We want more students engaging in their environment, understanding their impact, and knowing what they can do as thinkers, problem solvers, or just thought partners around how to be part of their ecosystem. Did that cover it, Seabury? Okay. And that's us. This is just all of our teachers. Look how engaged they are. Part of the really modeling the pedagogy that we want them to see with their students. They're so excited. So thank you.
Great. Christina and Seabury, thank you so much. Seabury, we've talked about this many times. I've been a reader for BWET, and I'm very familiar with your grant program. But one of the things I think is really special about what happens through the Ocean Guardian schools in particular is that we've seen a number of districts where one school gets the grant, another school gets the grant, another school gets the grant. And then all of a sudden there's a tipping point where it feels like a lot of schools have kind of independently gone out and gotten this individual grant, and it leads to a tip. And I think that's, really a key feature. I don't know if it's by design or by accident, but we've seen it happen in a number of districts. I think it's wonderful that the BWET then can, kind of back that up to, think about some district support. And a key takeaway from me in all of this is that, the grants can provide money for districts to try something new or to try something they didn't think they were going to be able to do kind of in their current thinking. But it's usually not the money that ends up being the most important feature of the grant. It ends up being the cachet that it brings and kind of the enthusiasm. It's the belonging to a group and hearing how other grantees are using the funds. And then it's really the access to the professionals and the resources of the granting organization. And NOAA does an incredible job of that. Seabury, I don't know if you have a last word on the grant section before we move on, but I know you have a lot of experience and wisdom and have seen this happen many times where kind of the school-based grant happens at a number of schools in a district and it hits a tipping point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always describe it like small little embers that create a much larger effort. Because like you said, I mean, there's kind of a desire to want to do something, but then when you find out there's actually funding to help with that, and it's much more than funding. I mean, we really provide a lot, not only the resources, the data sets, the expertise, but I know most of my grant recipients and schools very well, and I'm always available to help support them, talk through issues, we hold conferences and trainings and professional development to really help guide them along that pathway towards ultimately towards sustainable implementation of these of literacy, environmental literacy across school districts.
Great. Yeah, so grants are a fantastic way to affect change, to support new initiatives, to try something new, to get an influx of resources. But they are, time limited. And, the key thing is then to get it into these systemic structures. So, so next we're going to turn to hearing from Sarah Whiting. Sarah Whiting is the Director of Client Engagement Services, but more importantly, the Director of Data Science for 10 Strands. Sarah has experience teaching elementary and middle school. She worked as a STEM TOSA, led a K-12 strong workforce pathway programs. And recently, she's been taking a deep dive into some of the funding data around California and has some research and insights to share with us about how districts are leveraging funds that they, kind of naturally receive to support environmental literacy. So Sarah, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Whiting, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some doors to environmental literacy that you may not think to knock on, but they're doors that can help you get some of this work done if there's barriers to going through a more traditional route to environmental literacy. So the first one we're going to talk about are GO bonds, or general obligation bonds. And a lot of the time people are like, well, why would I be thinking about construction if I'm thinking about environmental literacy? But any GO bonds that are passed after 2010 or 2011, around there, are subject to compliance for Cal Green sustainability construction and renovation codes. So as this money is coming into school districts for building out new buildings or renovating their buildings, they're having to do sustainable building and adding of energy efficiency and adding of renewables. And this is a great place to have students start to first identify why their buildings were not sustainable to begin with, and how these improvements are helping their energy efficiency, helping to reduce their carbon footprint. And that's just compliance, right? And those are already good ideas for students to have, but you can also get really creative with what you're doing with this funds. And as you can see, we basically pulled all of the GO bond funding between 2010 and it's up to 2029, but it's 2024. So basically between 2010 and 2024, and you can see across the region, there are billions of dollars coming into schools in order to do this green construction. And so what's great is schools are leveraging this in order to really start making robust sustainability programs that include environmental literacy. So if Nate would go to the next page, we have an example from Los Angeles Unified School District, and LAUSD is kind of an outlier example because they're basically in their own realm when it comes to student enrollment versus the other districts within California. But they have received $17.985 billion since 2004. And within those bonds, they had sustainability goals around energy efficient schools, reducing asbestos, lead paint, air pollution, and water quality hazards within their campuses, and addressing school facility inequities. So that's where they started. But where they went was creating a robust sustainability effort, including water conservation, water stewardship, campus ecology, and emerging technologies, all which involve a environmental literacy component with their students. So I will drop their link in the chat. It is incredible to see some of the work that they've been doing with this funding. And obviously this is not all just GO bond funds. They have braided funding from other sources in order to create such a robust program. But it's really cool to see how they've aligned some of their facilities work with some of their environmental literacy work. Things that kind of combine the two, like schoolyard forests, like gardens, those are all things that you can utilize Go Bond funding for as well. So it's a really great place to kind of start the work, especially if you're finding there are barriers to getting funding or getting buy-in within the curricular part of the district when you start. I'll pause here in case there are any questions before we move into our next kind of tangential door to environmental literacy.
There are no questions in the chat yet.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and move on to our next one, which is career and technical education, or CTE. Now, people might say, like, are you talking about vocational ed? Why would we be doing CTE with environmental literacy? First off, they actually have a standard for career ready practice that goes across every single pathway in CTE that states that students should understand the environmental, social, and economic impacts of decisions, right? So already there should be some environmental literacy embedded within career and technical education. Sometimes there's not, depending on the teacher, especially someone who's coming out of industry who may not be aware of environmental literacy as much or as comfortable with teaching it, but it should be there. And also, there's a ton of funding coming down the line for career and technical education, especially in Governor Newsom's new plans and his budgets. There's a lot of emphasis on career readiness, specifically around climate-related career readiness. So as you can see, there's Perkins allocation for the state yearly. That's the CTIG allocation for the state yearly, the K-12 Strong Workforce allocation for the state yearly, Golden State Pathways, middle school academies. And there's also industry partners who are interested in funding CTE programs in their region, and especially industries like water and power industries who are facing what they call the silver tsunami of people retiring and no one coming back into those pathways. And many of those pathways are starting to go really green with, you know, renewable energy and better water treatment practices. So I would like to give an example of a much, much smaller district than Los Angeles Unified to flip to the other side. So Cabrillo Unified School District is in Half Moon Bay, California, and they've been able to braid together funding sources to create a sustainable agri-science pathway that goes from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade, where they get to go on field trips to local sustainable farms. They get to grow their own food. They get to take animals to state fairs and present them in state fair auctions and get awards for sustainably and humanely raising these animals. So it's a really robust program that they were able to put together by braiding some Perkins funding, some CTIG funding, K-12 Strong Workforce, and also receiving donations from Peninsula Clean Energy that helped provide all of the transportation for their field trips. So it's great to see how they were able to weave those funding streams together in order to create a really good, sustainable pathway for their students in that area. And finally, just kind of thinking about the work that we could be doing with this money. A little while ago, earlier this year, I scraped the NOVA platform, which is basically where all the K-12 Strong Workforce programs are held. So all the grants that have been awarded between the start of the program in round 1, we are now in round 6. So these are 6 different rounds of K-12 Strong Workforce grants. And in the blue bars, you can see the total allocation in dollars for each of those different regions. And then in green, you can see the bars where they're grants that have any like verbiage around sustainability or electric vehicles or renewables or green economy. Any of those are all in the green. So as you can see, there's a lot of funding coming in, but not all of that funding is being utilized for sustainable pathways. So I am here advocating for using these funds to help make our career and technical education pathways more sustainable and also bring in more of those green skills, because recent data from LinkedIn and from other sources about the direction of our economy are really showing that not only will students with green skills and knowledge be really highly prized and needed, but they will be paid approximately 13% more than students entering up the same occupation without those skills. So if we want our students getting into life-sustaining careers, having those environmental literacy opportunities before they exit the K-12 system are going to be really important for that.
Sarah,
so that's my spiel.
Yeah, thank you so much for that that overview of just, you know, how much funding is there, how much opportunity is there. And as you were speaking, I was just reflecting on changes I've seen in my own district, and missed opportunities that I see in Fremont Unified. We did a big middle school conversion. We went from a junior high model to a middle school model, which involved a lot of build out of some of the campuses. They've installed things like bioswales on those campuses, but we haven't organized any educational programming around the bioswales. You know, we've had Prop 39 money for energy upgrades, but we haven't, you know, made that visible. So like all of the lights have been transformed, you know, all of the HVAC systems have been updated. And we haven't done much of anything to help connect that to learning. So I see a lot of opportunity in my own district, and I hope others do as well. And then on the CTE side, we've also seen some pretty exciting changes. You know, in Fremont, where the Tesla factory is, you know, I visited our local ROP program, and I've seen students working on cars with carburetors, cars with fuel injectors, hybrid cars, and they just used a bunch of CTE money to buy electric kit cars that are modular so students can learn about how all of those systems work and can support maintenance in those vehicles as well. So there's change afoot, and I really appreciate you kind of helping us think through how big of an opportunity is in this area. So thank you, Sarah. If you have questions for Sarah, throw them in the chat. She can answer in the background. We'll also have time with the different presenters and breakout rooms at the end where you can maybe get in a smaller conversation. But I do want to turn to kind of, you know, the big chunk of funding that most people think about when they think about school funding, which is the local control funding formula, kind of the general funds of a district, which is the meat and potatoes of how a district operates. These LCFF plans or these LCFF dollars are tied to plans, and what the plan says has a lot to do with how those dollars are spent. So to tell us a little bit more about how LCFF works, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Baird, co-chair of the District Innovation Hub, who will then introduce Andre Gray from Encinitas Unified School District, who will talk about how her district has pulled all of these threads together around the values of sustainability and environmental literacy. So Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Nate. And so I just want to start by saying that one of the biggest things I hear from people that are trying to do this work out in the field is, I just wish that my superintendent knew how important this was. You know, if I could get them into the room, if I could get them out into the field, they would see this. Well, I'm going to introduce Andre Gray here. Dr. Gray not only gets it, she actually supports it in multiple ways, through how they train teachers, through how they spend money, how they communicate about the district. So you're all gonna want Andre to be your superintendent here in about 15 minutes. But Andre, I've known for a long time. We've been friends and colleagues for 8 years. She has over 30 years experience in the field. She has been an assistant superintendent for the last 5 years. She has been the superintendent in the district. She had a lot of work to do there, cleaning up the mess from the prior guy. She's been a teacher. She's been, she's done all the roles. So she gets this. She can talk environmental literacy. She supports environmental literacy. And I'm going to turn it over to Andre to tell you how she's doing that in her district.
Well, he left out a very important part. When I came to the district, it's because Tim was the superintendent. And so he had laid so much groundwork. And so I say all the time, it's just my job to continue to keep it going and growing. So we had tremendous foundation, but it was definitely a challenge and something important to me that I continue to nurture in our district. So I'll start by just a little bit, it is great to be the last of this presentation because I feel like I'm going to talk a little bit about all of them and what it really looks like putting it all together. And just as I heard all of the previous speakers talk about, it was all student-centered. How do we help students in this world and thinking about their future? And how do we really put money to it to make sure that that's happening? So we always start with our why. And the great thing about Encinitas is for a very long time, part of our culture and our climate has been sustainability. Environmental stewardship came out very clearly as one of our core values early on. And we are in an agricultural historical community. This is where the poinsettia was born. So there's a lot of roots to that, but there's also a lot of roots to innovation in our district, and a lot, we're near the coast. So there's a lot of pull from our families and our staff to make sure that this is front and center. So, our vision that we recently kind of refreshed was we ignite the limitless potential of all learners. And there's a lot to that. And I'll go to the next slide. We recently went through the process this last year of updating our learner profile, really bringing all stakeholders together in a variety of different settings to kind of reestablish our priorities. And this was especially important after COVID, wanting to make sure that we were listening to the community and that we were kind of doing a reset. And it meant bringing the community together to kind of bond again, but then to think about everything that was possible. And not surprising, environmental stewardship and sustainability are embedded into all of our pieces to our learner profile and our strategic plan. I have the QR code there, but I'm going to highlight just the global citizen part of it. You'll notice also around kind of our learning model, personalized, authentic, competency-based, equitable, and inclusive, real-world learning, and making sure our students are involved in all kinds of opportunities that bring learning to life, both inside and outside of the classroom, are core to our work. But global citizen is one where we call out some particular, you can go on to the next one. Yeah, thank you. The next slide.
I am clicking to advance. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
It was
Okay.
not moving. So, okay.
Great. I was like, am I frozen?
No, apparently I was frozen. So we're good. Here we
No
go.
problem.
Global citizen.
So global citizen, it's one of those things as we started to bring people together, it was probably the most prevalent. And global citizen and empowered learner and wellness advocates, those are just the heart of who we are in Encinitas. So we define global citizens as learners that are culturally aware, environmentally responsible, and making a positive impact on their community and world. And then if you look at the bottom two bullets, students act responsibly toward the environment and understand the impact of their actions. And I participate in creating equitable, just, and sustainable communities. And one of the things that we know is if we are very clear about our intended outcomes, these are the outcomes we expect for all learners, both adults and students. We have to be very clear about how we're going to make that happen. These are things we need to measure. These are things we need to see in all of our communications. These are things we need to see in our classrooms. We need to be able to point it out, label it, and students need to be able to label it. So just an example of that, all of our campuses and all of our students, K6, do student-led conferences. And in their student-led conferences, one of the requirements is that students think about their growth in terms of these competency areas. And so students have to have very clear evidence of how they are demonstrating being a global citizen. What are some of the specific projects or problem-based learnings that they've done, inquiry approaches that they can have some clear evidence, either the product, the project, or something they've done in the community that represents these competencies. So one of the things that's important, next one, is also that we look at and I loved hearing about the having the physical structures be an important teaching tool. So we have a lot of opportunities in our classrooms, but we also know the physical environment is very important. So these are some of the areas that we look at that are a part of our programming. And when I talk about the funding sources, you'll see that the efforts of these come in many different ways. But we do have, solar tubes, and we have, all of our campuses have solar. We have a variety of different rain collection, school gardens on every single campus. We have a farm that we do farm to school, and it also is a learning hub for all of our students to come and do sustainability work on entrepreneurship, water conservation, renewable energy, all based on the NGSS standards, and really making sure that they are outside learning in a variety of different capacities. So with that, I want to make sure that you have the kind of the whole picture, that it's not just one element of environmental stewardship or sustainability, but we look at all of those. It's a real big systems approach in our district. And that means that a lot of this has to have funding, and we have to be very creative in how we do that. So how do we walk the talk? Because it's one thing to say that this is a goal. It's one thing to say that it's embedded in our culture, but it's another thing to say this is actually happening and how we do it. And if you want to make things happen, you have to demonstrate that it is valued in your budget as well. And I agree with many of the things that were said about oftentimes a bond measure or a grant can be something that is a starting point. But I also truly believe that if this is important enough, it needs to be in our regular budget, and it needs to be demonstrated across settings so that everybody knows that we are, whether it's about the people, the resources, the time, the finances, those are all aligned to this goal of sustainability in our district. So this is how we kind of do that. Just a little bit of overview. I know there's a lot of different people on the call, but the local control accountability plan is basically our state mechanism for having accountability within districts. And all districts have a LCAP plan, and the LCAP plan is inclusive of basically your goals. What do you want to accomplish? What are the actions and services you're going to do to make that happen? What are the metrics you're going to use? And then what are the dollars that you have put towards that? The LCAP plan has to include the 8 state priority areas, but really districts have the opportunity to write their goals based on their needs of their district. So you are considering all of your input and your data and your information in thinking about the state priorities, and then you're writing your goals and your actions to meet those. So we only have 5 goals in our district, and one of them, goal number 3, is EUSD will maintain and improve safe, green, and innovative learning environments that engage students and promote health and wellness. That goal has been since 2017 when we did that particular LCAP, and we have made sure that through the many iterations of the LCAP, which are an ongoing 3-year cycle, that we continue to not only have that goal, but we continue to look at how we're addressing those. So the next slide, I'm going to show you some of the specifics under the LCAP goal. So these are some things, this is directly from our LCAP. Every single goal has actions that you're going to take, and it's going to have the description of those actions, and it's going to have the funds allocated. And so when we sit down with our many different groups every year and we listen, we have student groups, we have parent groups, we have teachers, we're always listening to the feedback to determine what are the things that we are seeing positive outcomes, what are the areas that maybe we are needing to address differently. But these particular items are all really important ways we address sustainability in our district. So sometimes we think of LCAP as only being related to teaching and learning, but it's really important that we look at some of those features, like, you know, everything from our water filling stations to chemical-free machinery. Those are things that we also put because it is absolutely relevant to that goal number 3. Many of the items that you'll see sometimes are things that we just automatically do, but when you spell it out in your LCAP, it's demonstrating the importance in this particular area. We have a consultant agreement, our green consultants, you'll see that in that 3.5. Our consultants are a really important part of the environmental literacy education in our district. They come alongside our teachers and we use their supports at all 9 of our sites. I do believe when you have very specific people who are kind of in charge and it's not a volunteer basis or it's not up to the teacher, it is every child is going to have the same high quality teaching and learning around these areas. It has been tremendously supportive. And so that's kind of where where we started, but it is so important that it continues to be maintained. You'll also see we have our farm lab in there. And then we have even our ground staffing. We all already have ground staff, but when we put it in there that they're also supporting our school gardens, again, it's calling it out that it is extremely relevant to what we're doing and we're putting our money where we've said our priorities are. And then we also, prior to my coming to the district, Tim was able to pass Prop P, a bond measure. But again, this is where it was truly called out to our voters and our constituents that our Prop P would really be based on energy efficiency, solar energy, installation of the solar tubes, lighting, bringing reclaimed water, and then HVACs and upgrading restroom features. And I will say I can attest to the fact that students have been involved in looking at these improvements and talking about that. So whether it was the meters that were demonstrating how much was being saved because of solar energy and the competition between schools, also even the use of things like solar tubes. Our students led the campaign to support students in using teachers in using the solar tubes properly. So they, created light switch covers and a whole campaign, but they had to do the studies and the research behind that. And we did the same with LED lighting. They did some data collection and made some decisions about LED lighting before presenting that to the board for some changes. The next one is our child nutrition services. This is something actually we just did this year. This is the first time we've done it. We grow thousands of pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables that are on our salad bars every day. We do have an organic regenerative farm, and we learned that we could invoice our child nutrition services for the food that they are providing us. So instead of going out to buy this is food that we are essentially purchasing from them. And there's a lot of specifics about how much they can charge and how much we can do, but it is something that continues to help. That is a solely self-funded program, but being able to have a little of that come back to us allows us to continue to have this high quality lunch program for our students. And then grants. I know there's a lot of talk about grants. I'll highlight the California Department of Food and Ag grant. We have been very fortunate to receive that grant. We use that over $100,000, and that has been part of our farm lab as well as involving students in our menu planning. They have been able to create dishes with our farm lab produce and then taste test it, get feedback, do surveys, create their own farmers market. So a lot of great learning that's happened through that. We also do a lot of small grants. I heard that people talk about that. For example, we have garden grants, even just the kind of in-kind grants that we get from our local vendors. There's a lot that by asking, you find that there's other things that can be provided. And then, partnerships were also talked about, and I cannot say enough about partnerships and how these really impact some of the extras that we're able to do. I heard busing about field trips earlier. We do not have we don't have busing in our district. And we do have this incredible farm lab where all of our students attend 1 to multi-day units of study. And to get students back and forth was a critical component to make that work. And we were able to create an agreement with our YMCA. They have buses sitting there all day long because they bus students to specialized programs or their after school and before school programs, but they don't do anything during the day. And so they were looking to expand. So we bartered and we have an agreement. And this has been probably 7 years now. They provide busing to our students to our farm lab every day. And then in turn, we allow them to use our farm lab campus after school to provide after school programming. And then another example, our botanic garden. Again, if you don't ask and get to know some of your other nonprofits in your area, it's hard to know what they can give or how you can work together. But the San Diego Botanic Garden, we have about $1 million grant with a co-grant with them. They are redoing our entire canyon near our school district, one of our particular schools. And because we want students at the center of the learning, working together, we were able to establish students as part of this program with everything from planting the new habitats and native plants to creating a learning pathway that they'll be able to enjoy the landscape and have kind of an outdoor adventure built into the canyon. And again, that's completely free to us, but it was the partnerships. We also have our senior center and our community resource center. So Be Worthy Farms is another one that we give them. They lease out some of our land on our farm, and in turn, they give us a farming consultancy on just a barter basis. So just working with them for things that we can give each other that are mutually beneficial and in the same space with the same vision of supporting sustainability. All right, and that is the last of my slides, but I'm happy to answer questions, or if there's something I missed, please jump in.
Oh, that was great. Thank you.
Superintendent Gray, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for tying it all together, for showing the specific language from your LCAP. I think that was really informative. And talking about how values, vision, mission, and budgets align. I really appreciated hearing about budgets beyond dollars and thinking about the value of partnerships and kind of mutual wins with community partners and city agencies. I think that's really fantastic. Thank you for calling out the California Department of Food and Agriculture grants. That grant is open right now. As many of you know, California recently moved to universal free school meals for students. And as a part of that funding to help make that happen, the state was really mindful of some environmental co-benefits. So, in the legislation and the budgets that help support that, it's specific that schools can get support to get dishwashers so that they can, use reusable serviceware. It's specific in there that, there's support to buy locally grown produce, to have kids learn about where their food comes from, to increase the vegetarian options in the meals, to have kids participate in designing the menus, to learn about the food systems in California. So that grant is open right now if anybody has some free time on their hands. It's due on April 4th. So, some quick turnaround there. But there are, I think, about $55 million in grant funds available through that grant this year. Yeah, so you can see the kind of increasing levels of funding year to year through the CDFA grant program. So check that out. I'd like to thank all the presenters. This is kind of the time where the formal presentations come to a close, I do want to make a few announcements. But what happens after the formal presentations is we're going to open some breakout rooms. So if you wanted to get into a smaller conversation around some of these topics, you have some time to make those connections, to talk to some other participants, to share your ideas and the practices that you are doing in your districts. So as we close out, a couple of resources, Sarah has put a feedback link in the chat. Your feedback helps us know what's working in these webinars, helps us know what we can do better. And it's also a place where you can give us ideas about topics you would like to see coming forward. It's also a place where you can share if you've got something that you think you would love to highlight from your district or organization, please let us know. We'd love to feature these stories. As I mentioned, today's webinar is part of a series that we run every spring. Next month in April, we'll be taking a look at connecting facilities operations and student learning. We heard a lot about that from Encinitas, and I hope we'll hear a lot more about that and other examples from around the state next month. We'll close out the spring with troubleshooting challenges. There are plenty of challenges to overcome when you're trying to do new and difficult stuff, when you're doing important work. So we'll hear some different approaches to troubleshooting challenges that frequently come up when trying to take sustainability and environmental literacy to scale district-wide. There are a number of resources offered through CAELI. One is a CAELI partner portal. It's a website where school districts can find out who their local and nearby environmental ed providers were. We had the fantastic story from Christina of, like, it's one thing to send your students to Yosemite. Everybody should go to Yosemite sometime in their life, but we should also guarantee that kids have access to exploring the environment where they actually live. Your community-based partner portal can help you make those connections. If you're a nonprofit organization, you can list yourself in the partner portal so that schools have another place to find you. Sarah, do you know about this one, or is this a one that Amy has left with us?
I think this is one that Amy has left with us, but it looks like there's a grant for working with bilingual students, and there's some materials as well. So feel free to click the link and peruse. Unfortunately, I don't have more information than that.
Great. And Christina, you'd also called out the partnerships that you'd been making with local tribal organizations. And I think it's important to remember that California has the largest population of Native American students in the country. They are often, overlooked in our systems. So this is a place to also find resources for those students as well. Okay, so we've we kind of set up 4 breakout rooms based on the kind of 4 funding streams today. In a moment, Sarah's going to open them up. We'll keep the breakout rooms open until 5:30, and we'll close them pretty promptly at 5:30, so everybody is forced to head off and have a life outside of Zoom. But we do hope that you stick around for 22 minutes and make some connections. You're free to jump between the rooms. If you show up in a room and no one is there, look and see where everybody's hanging out and maybe go join the conversation there. So the breakout rooms around grant funding, bonds, career technical education, and LCAP. And I think our presenters will distribute themselves to the rooms that were kind of relevant to the topics they discussed. So go ahead, Sarah, open up those breakout rooms. I'll stop sharing my screen, and you should see a pop-up on your window that allows you to self-select, but if anybody needs help getting into a breakout room, let me know and I'd be happy to move you there.